Good morning.
Morning. Hello, everyone. Let's give everyone a couple of seconds to join. We have Oksana co-hosting us and helping us with admitting people, so hopefully nobody has to wait. Wave your hands as usual if you can hear us well. And if you can see us well. Okay, people nodding. I said wave your hands.
So they're not hearing us well.
Okay, yes, attention also counts. Thank you so much for joining. We're super happy to see such a turnout. What I can see, 26 people already in, and that's probably one of our largest online breakfasts. We are happy to see that it's growing. And today we're actually going to test run a new feature of Zoom. I'm actually going to launch a poll. And okay. Oh, okay. So it's a huge poll, but just answer the first question, please. All right. It turns out that you have to. Okay. So yeah, just let us know if it's your first breakfast club, or you have been before, or if you come regularly, and then we'll see. And then we'll relaunch it with the other questions. Don't worry about it. Attendees are viewing questions and 0% have voted. Second time. Hey, we have a regular basically here. It's my fourth time?
Yeah, it's fifth time actually.
Fifth time, yes.
Fifth time.
I've pretty much been to everyone. All right. So as you know, today we're going to talk about how to measure learning success, and this hence all these questions. You don't have to know answers to them yet. It turns out that you can't launch questions one by one. I will fix that next time. So far, we're just interested in knowing how many people have participated in this breakfast before. Okay, let's give everyone 30 more seconds, and then we'll jump straight into my presentation.
Yeah, and before we start, short introduction, especially for those who are here first time. My name is Raivis. I'm CEO of INTEA and founder, and Sergey is the co-founder of INTEA, or rather vice versa. Yeah, and the way we do it here for those who are the first time is that we do have a presentation. We'll be asking you to answer some questions, and don't hesitate to write in the chat your comments or questions, because at some points in this let's call it e-breakfast, we will stop and take a look at your questions and try to answer a comment on that.
Yes, absolutely. So don't hold your questions until the end. We are not the kind of company that has the QA slide at the end of every presentation. We rather take questions as you go. We have people monitoring the chat. They will let us know if something pops up. So we want to make this as interactive and as useful to you as possible. So having said that, let's begin. So let me share my presentation and we'll kick it away. All right. Perfect. So it's very convenient to actually have two PCs here. I can actually monitor what's happening. All right. So I will probably drive this as usual, and I will kind of interview Raivis because he's the person who is most closest to actual problems that we have in the corporate world, and he's the one who tackles them head on. I am kind of the theoretical scientist here in that sense. So the question that some of you asked, I think in the past couple of meetings, was about measurement, right? So we used to talk about how to sell e-learning to your employees, how to market it, how to make sure they actually use a lot of it. And then there is a question, of course, how can you tell if the project has been successful or not? Before we actually start measuring something, I think we need to define it. So here's a question for you. How do you define learning success, right? So what's a successful project? And this is actually a question to you, and please use the chat function to let us know. I'm going to help you with kind of answering half of that. So let's say you end the phrase. So last year we had this great project and it was really successful because. So because why? Can you tell us why was that some project of yours successful? What was the reason for you to call it successful?
Yeah, we have an idea in the chat that first you have to set KPIs. So probably that's the idea, that you have to do that before you start the project.
Yes,
right?
Right. That's definitely so. Let's say it was a success because it has met the performance indicators.
Yes.
All right. That's a witty answer, but what are the PIs?
Yeah.
What are the key performance indicators for a project? So it was successful because, okay, it has met KPIs, but yeah, if you could share a little insight.
Yeah, so what kind of KPIs can we set for a learning project?
Yeah.
I mean, realistically.
Realistically, no one got fired, for example.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was a success.
Yeah, great user feedback.
User feedback, they liked it. Basically, everyone liked it. That's typically a successful project if everyone liked it. All right.
Or this is actually sometimes how we talking about the project that happened in the past. If we have not set any other KPI, we usually rely on the feedback from the users, and they say, yeah, I really liked it. Yeah, so this is at least some indication.
Any more ideas?
A number of people finished the training and found it useful. Okay, number of people, completion rates, and finding it useful.
So if it's not mandatory, where pretty much 100 or very close to 100% of people will finish it. So if it's not mandatory, then it's really a good indicator of people abandoning it midway. We all know the MOOCs, the massive online open courses where people maybe abandon them in like 95% or 90%.
Yeah, the average completion is below 10.
Couple of percent.
All right. So anything else? Yeah, we have, of course, business impact. And the comment is that, we are looking for business impact, but realistically, we are looking at the measure of how users are satisfied. Another measurement or idea is to measure satisfaction of the SMEs or the experts or the buying parties. So if I ordered a sales training for my salespeople, so how do I feel about it? Which is
talking to actual customer in that sense makes a lot of sense. And I would say that satisfaction of subject matter experts can correlate with anything but project success. Like they couldn't care less. Like maybe if the project didn't take too much time away from them, that's happy. Also happy. Or if you have created a truly terrible learning, but you have included all the information that the SME has given you, they will be really happy. They will think that this is a success.
Yeah, which is
so subject matter experts. I cannot say they are your worst enemy. They can be. They can also be your best friends. But I would say that their kind of interests and their benefits, they align with a lot of different things, but not necessarily business success or learning impact. Or anything like that.
But of course we have to take it into account, because without their satisfaction, also the training outcomes of the future projects are also jeopardized. So they have to be happy.
They have to be happy. They're definitely one of the stakeholders, and you have to keep them happy.
The chat is full of ideas, and just take a look at them.
Element of surprise. I like that.
Yeah, that's not
recommendation. Word of mouth. That is definitely kind of a very that is a very good way. Actually, that is not a measure of success. I think that is the measure of how they liked it. So you are still measuring how they liked it, but you are measuring it not by just asking them, but by actually checking if they have kind of put their money where their mouth is, right? So have they actually recommended something? Because a lot of people will say, I like it, but would you recommend it? Well, I don't know.
Completion rate,
pass rate,
pass rate, test results. So
key messages came across. I actually like that. That's actually measuring learning. So have they learned anything? That there hasn't been a lot of those answers, and that is it's not the first time we're running this, and that is very typical. So to put all of that in order, how many I don't have a poll for that, but wave your hand if you know this guy. or you might be seeing him for the first time, but you've certainly read about him, Donald Kirkpatrik. Yeah, I see INTEA people waving. We have trained you well.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah, some other people. Yeah, some pluses coming up in the chat. Some people waving and nodding. Yeah. So
okay.
So yeah, this is the name most of us know.
Yes, this kind of is the chapter 1 or 2 of pretty much every e-learning rule book. So we will not be teaching you on Donald Kirkpatrik today. Everyone pretty much knows this pyramid. We'll run through those levels for those who might be encountering this for the first time, or maybe just to keep everyone on the same page truly. But then what I wanted to actually do today is to ask Raivis to dive in with me into how do you actually apply that, because everyone has seen this pyramid, everyone likes this pyramid, but how do you actually use that? So let me start with getting you through those levels. So level 1 so Donald Kirkpatrik, for those who don't know, in 1960s, he has formulated the 4 levels of learning impact. And this model has been used ever since without much change. And it's in, like I said, it's in every textbook, guidebook, rule book on e-learning and learning as such. Of course. So number 1, how do you measure learning success? Well, reaction. You check if they liked it, right? So that is, that comes in the form of, smiley sheets. Have you liked this training? Was this useful? Please rate the content, and all those smiley sheets are those rate 1 to 5 with smiley faces on them. So that is kind of what we see a lot in the chat. Then the second one, like learning, was this a successful project? Yes, because they learned from it, right? You can check learning. You can check whether the key messages, as someone said in the chat, was carried across. You can check whether they know all the facts and models. That's basically knowledge check, test result. Then the number 3 is, was this a success? Yes, and they actually do things differently now, hopefully better, or they're not making mistakes as they used to, and they sell more, and they produce something faster, and they fill out reports more accurately, whatever we were training them on. Or in today's world, when everyone is training everyone on cybersecurity, for example, they don't click unknown links as much as they used to, something like that. So you can see how, let's say, you can have a training where everyone liked it, and you can see a training where everyone has learned from it, but nothing has changed in their job. It's like smoking. Like everyone knows that smoking is bad for you, but they still keep smoking, a lot of those people. So knowing something does not change behavior, and there are no smokers who will say, whoa, smoking is bad, I did not know that, I will stop immediately. Like they all know that. They have been, any learning that has been thrown onto them has been very successful in terms of, getting the message across, but not very successful in changing their behavior, right?
Yeah. So, and 2 comments here from the practical side that I represent here is talking about if they like it or not. I can't remember exactly the name of the research and who carried it out, but when they tried to understand what impacts this liking of training the most, then the surprising result was, and I mean, this was in the days before COVID, that the location of the training, the venue was number 1 thing that correlated with the overall likeness of the course. So this is why you bring your folks to the 5-star hotel to make a bigger impact, and it's actually the 5-star hotel that does it. So liking is not and we all understand it's not enough.
So if you run let's say 1,000 conferences a year, if you're a conference organizer, which was actually my first job 20 years ago. So if you run 1,000 conferences per year, then you can correlate this data, and then you can see that people like the conference if it was in a very good place, nice place. It wasn't raining, and the meals were nice, nothing got cold, nothing got delayed, and so on.
Weather was good.
All those things. And the content and the lectures and so on, and then even networking opportunities and all other things, they kind of come after that. Again, doesn't mean that happens every time, but that is kind of the risk embedded into reaction. Like when people say they like the training, they don't typically specify what they liked about it. Maybe they liked the fact that in that training, nobody was annoying them and bothering them and asking them to actually participate, and they were able to just sit in their phones and do their job or something like that, and that's why it's a good training. So that's a risky level. Learning, we've talked about that. Behavior, we talked about that. Number 4 on Kirkpatrik is the business goal, right? So we are training people to reach a business goal. We're training them to sell more. We're training them to do less mistakes and so on. So are they actually doing that? Because if we train them to let's say we train them in time management. They like the training, they learned a lot about time management, they're actually using time management techniques, but does it impact our business? Are they still reporting being over? Is more work being done? For example, are we spending less on meetings and so on? So that's the number 4. And then Donald wasn't around for that, I think, but nowadays people always add this number 5, the top level, the return on investment, whether it paid off, because we could have spent millions on this training and we have reached something, there's an impact, but that impact is actually less than the amount of money we paid for it. So the question of whether we got more than we paid for is a huge one. So now that we are on the same page, let us know in the chat if you find this useful or if it's familiar to you. I wanted to dive into kind of the practical aspect with Raivis. So let's look at every level in more detail and see how it implies in practice, and also at a few mistakes that we often see people do. So reaction, level 1. The typical tool for that is smiley sheets. They are called smiley sheets. They come in all sorts and forms. They rate your training stars at the end, all sorts of surveys and questionnaires. Even checking whether you would recommend this is kind of net promoter score. If we look at the marketing toolkit, as we've done a couple of breakfasts ago, a net promoter score is a way for you to judge whether something is a success by asking people how likely they are to recommend something, and then you do a little bit of math on that, and then you get a number that shows that this is something that people truly like because they are ready to commit their kind of time and reputation in telling others about it. The problem with smiley sheets is that the best question to ask there is to check for confidence, right? So not for liking it, but to check for whether people are confident, whether they found it useful, whether they are likely to come to another training like that again, whether they are likely to recommend, as we said, whether they deem those skills applicable on the job, and how fast or how often, so that you can say stuff like, yes, I think I'm going to use that at some point in time, or I'm going to use it right away. I can't wait to get back and actually reorganize my things using the technique technique you've explained to me. So that's kind of questions that you actually have to be asking. But what we see, in fact, in pretty much every conference that I visit, people ask something along the lines of, how did you like that? And they're very much interested in quality of presenters, for example, and giving feedback to presenters and so on. And I've spoken to a few conference organizers who said, well, we've just stopped doing that because we can actually see that from physical presence in learning. We cannot actually see if people like that or not. We can just hear it in the crowd. We can also tell if a presenter is good or bad ourselves. We have enough experience, even more experience than learners in that, and we're not fooled by charisma or tricks. Some people show, like I've seen people in keynotes showing tricks, like card tricks, for example. And as an organizer, they say we can do a better job of judging that, but it's only the people that you that went there, they can tell you whether they see this as applicable on the job, and if they're confident in what they've learned, that it's useful, and they've actually learned it to the level that they can apply it. Yes, and at this level, focus is on what can we do better as learners. This is a kind of you'll see in those 5 levels. I've kept this focus part for all of them. So in this level, this is kind of introspective level. You are asking learners, but you're thinking about yourselves. You're thinking about, can we make this training better to improve the confidence? Can we make it more practical? What can we do to improve the results that you gather from others, but you focus on yourself and on your training? Make sense?
Absolutely. I would also add that this level is very good to assess if you have any kind of, let's call it, infrastructural problems, like the learning experience. You can try to measure learning experience as such and understand that, for example, the training is okay, but actually the problem was that you have to log in here and log in there, and it's unclear, and people get stuck and they just cannot use that product because it's especially if it's an online product.
Yes.
So just what Sergey was saying, you can improve things, you can do better. A lot of them right now, with all the online aspect coming in, they are not so much about the content maybe, but about how you connect, where you connect. Does it work on mobile? Can you view it on mobile? Is the lecturer ready to do that now in a Zoom meeting instead of doing it in the auditorium or something? So those kind of technical things.
Yeah, that is actually a great point, a very practical point. So instead of asking like whether you like the training, you can ask whether it was easy to access the training.
Yeah.
If you are if you think that this new way of delivering this training is risky, right? If your learners do 5 e-learning courses per month and they've been doing it for years now, you probably don't care about that much, and you can decide kind of decode any problems by kind of technical means, by just seeing how many people have started and finished, how much time it took, and so on. But if you are, let's say, transitioning from classroom learning to online learning just now, then yes, one of the important questions is not how did you like it, but was it easy to access? That is like, if you want to see an example of a bad survey, this is what our Latvian Ministry of Education is doing right now. They are surveying people until the 9th of June, I think, on the teachers and students and parents on their experiences with those past 2-3 months of distance learning. And that is a survey that is, you can clearly see how much it's geared towards answers that will look, the organizers, kind of the ministry, that the answers should make them look good, and how they are avoiding hard questions. Yeah, so it's a bad example. But again, if you have a smiley sheet, don't hesitate to actually send it to us, and we'll look at it together at some point. That might be a fun little project to start with. Okay, let's move on to level 2, right? Remember, that was learning. Have they learned anything? Do you have anything in chat? You look interested.
Okay. Yeah. One of the comments about this liking the course, but that is in the chat, that in the company you can ask, would you pay for this course if you had to? Which is already a bit on a higher level. It's a bit, but
it's a good question
yes.
in theory. But what I'm doubting is whether people will answer honestly. It's like someone shows me a cool car, like Raivis shows me his car. He writes a very cool car, and he's like, do you think like this? Do you like this car? Yes, I like this car. Would you buy it? Yeah, I would. Like if I were you, maybe, or something. But
might not be informative. Yeah.
Might not be very it might just not be true. Would you buy it? Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I'd love to buy that car. I'd love to be able to afford that car, for example. But the actual fact is that I haven't bought that car when I had a chance, and that goes for your learners as well. They will tell you that yeah, we would pay for it, but instead try to sell that course to them next time and see if the results correlate.
No, the thing is, if they all answer no, then this is more informative.
I would say, good. That's a good point. You should focus on people who say like no.
How many no's you get in that kind of question? That's informative instead of the yeses you get.
Probably that's a good point, right? So learning, the tool for checking the learning success is knowledge check, right? And that should not be confused with the fact check that we always see in a lot of testing. In a lot of testing, yes. So so it actually, like most of the things, like someone has pointed out with the KPIs, for example, it starts before you actually deliver the learning. So if you start designing that learning experience, whether online or offline, you start by designing, the instructional side of it, and you make it applicable on the job. You try to tie it into the existing process. You digest it into like workable behavioral patterns and so on and so on. And therefore, we hope that training is, very, very practical and not just, wall of text and bunch of facts. And same thing goes for actually checking, right? So you should not check, what's written on page 15 or what year was that founded in. And, if I were asking you about Kirkpatrik model after this webinar, I would not be asking like, what was his first name, like Donald or John or Patrick or like Patrick.
Yeah, you would not even ask how many levels it has.
Yes.
Because that will not have an impact on how good training at my company is. The impact from knowing Kirkpatrik will be, what am I going to be doing now with all that knowledge?
Yes, like I will not ask you to recite the levels. I will not ask you to put the levels in the right order, which is one of the favorite e-learning exercises when someone presents you a model that contains levels. I will not ask you for definitions. I will ask you, I will give you a case where this is what learners said about a recent training. Do you think that was successful on which level, right?
Yeah.
Or here is the questionnaire that is distributed after a conference in a company. Do you think, what can be improved in that questionnaire? Which question do you think should go and what question would you add instead? Something like that. So you're checking for whether they have acquired that knowledge, whether it has been transferred and whether they have retained it and whether that has transformed into like actionable stuff, not just knowing stuff. And you don't ask people to recite facts. Yeah, so, I have a point for that. So skills acquired, you check whether the skills are acquired, not whether the facts are remembered. And you also check at this level, it's important to start kind of probing for commitment, right?
Yeah.
So, okay, now now that you've learned this, how likely are you to use that, right? So that is where you actually start kind of probing for the next level, where you check for commitment to change. Yes. So time management or cybersecurity. It's not only that you check whether people know the definition of spam, but whether they know what to do when spam arrives and whether they will do that in their real job.
Absolutely. One of the things here where the technology comes in, and for example, with a platform, we work a lot with cross-knowledge learning platform. It has a brilliant functionality called the action plan. Basically, to every learning you have, you can add an action plan where a learner can put in a date and an exact thing he's going to do by that date. And the platform will remind him on that date, remember, after the time management course, you said that you will now check your calendar and you will reallocate your meetings in this kind of new way. Have you done it?
Like a New Year's resolution.
Yeah, it's like a New Year's resolution automated. And those resolutions, it really doesn't matter do you use that platform or one platform or another, but giving them a chance to stop and think and make the resolution and maybe mark it somewhere is very, very important.
Yeah, it's actually interesting. don't really need a platform for that. Of course, it makes things much easier, but you can just ask your learners at the end of the course to mark their calendar, let's say 2 weeks from now, and put this phrase that you give them in that course into that calendar. And that phrase can be anything, can be a reminder, can be a resolution. You can give them a choice of things to put in. You have a question? We have a question?
We have a comment
Okay.
that mostly, from Simona, that mostly it's about creating awareness, that in order to learn, keep knowledge midterm and implement it needs more interaction of the learner with the content. Exactly. That's the practical side of it. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and fact-checking exams, which experts very much like, is sometimes not enough because, if my favorite example is about the anti-money laundering kind of compliance courses. Yeah, right after that course, I am able to answer those questions. But the case when somebody comes to the bank or tries to launder money, will I know what to do then? Yeah, will it be practical?
Well, that practicality and applicability, it actually starts with instructional design. It starts with actually forcing sometimes your SMEs to be more practical and simplify things to the level that people can use them in their jobs, not forcing them away from trying to teach everyone everything. Then designing the actual learning experience around that kind of case-based, practical, simulation-based approach rather than just dumping the facts on them. And then in the end, if you've done all of that, creating a knowledge check that actually checks for transfer of skills rather than just short-term memory about facts. That's good. And like I said, in terms of focus, how much has been carried over or retained, that is this is where you actually focus on the learner. Remember last level we were focusing on us, what can we do better? Now you're focusing on the learner. Next level, and we actually have jumped into that pretty much already, is the behavior, or sometimes it's called application. The way you check for the success at this level is you benchmark performance. Ideally, you know what the performance has been before training, what it is after training. And of course, to do that, like we've seen in the chat, you have to design KPIs ahead of time. Of course, that is important that this whole model is taken into account before you start designing a training. And then you ask a very simple question: how much has performance improved? Do people spend less time? Do they sell more? Do they click less suspicious links? How many mistakes they make in sorting goods on the warehouse, and so on. And if it was, and then you ask yourself second question, like if it's not improved at all, or not enough, or worsened sometimes, or it keeps worsening, you ask yourself a question like, was it a learning problem? And this is where you go into a training needs analysis, which you probably haven't done properly in the first place. So that is an indicator of you failing at, or succeeding at actually identifying the problem, identifying the fact that it's a learning problem, and then tackling it with a learning experience. And then here we go, one level up from us to learners, and now we go to the managers and we talk to them. So it's not very productive to ask people like how much your performance has improved. That is not a very reliable data. You should talk to their managers. So after you have trained your salespeople, are they selling better? What can you tell me? And that's why you need to you need a buy-in from them. You need their awareness again at the very beginning of the project, so that they know like the training will happen in 1 month from now, in 2 months from now, we'll come to you and we'll ask those questions.
Absolutely. I would add that with the amount of data available and with all those technological advancement that came in the last 10 years, let's say, you actually, because before, very often when we talked about performance and has it improved and have we solved the problem with training, we couldn't get data. Like for example, IT security, it was much harder those days to really figure out what people are doing. Nowadays, the IT in a big company knows everything you do there. So if you are doing a training, not only about the IT security, but anything else, where IT is involved, where some of the tasks do come with usage of certain systems, go to your IT. If you have a business intelligence unit in your company, go to them, talk about your problem, and they might have data, and they might have very interesting measurements. Yeah,
Yes.
and it's every company, of course, is in different industry, but a lot of trainings and a lot of things can be traced.
Yeah, and things sometimes they don't have to do a lot of work to actually help you.
Yeah.
Like if you let's say if you're training people on writing shorter emails, you can actually go to your IT and ask them to help you monitor the average length of an email or number of emails or the time of, like if you're training people on time management or work-life balance,
Yeah.
check how much time they spend inside corporate systems during work hours and not work hours. So they might have that data, but it will be hard for them to go back and kind of dig it out from somewhere. And then compare it and so on. If you come ahead of time and you ask to help you monitor that, they might be able to help you.
One comment here, because sometimes they might need to set up something to start collecting certain data. In a certain way. There's also comments how to distinguish training impact from daily management impact.
We'll get to that in terms of ROI, because it's also a good question. How do you distinguish impact of training from impact of pretty much anything else? But that's actually a good question. Like you can't, you have to like maybe go by gut feeling a little bit, and you have to kind of understand all the processes that are happening, because training doesn't typically come alone. It comes as a part of campaign, and you decide, okay, we now have to focus on selling more. So here's training on sales, here's a change in bonus incentives, and fees and commissions, and here's a change in management. Like we've also in parallel, we've trained sales managers to manage better, and we've also upgraded our sales software, and so on and so on. So how much of that can be attributed to training?
But again, talking to the managers and the people, because the interesting thing is that you talk to them before, you use them to set those KPIs and to also figure out the main problems you're trying to solve. Talk to them afterwards, talk to them in 3 or 6 months, and they might have a very good indication. I mean, a store manager,
if they don't know, who else?
Because if store manager manages a more or less stable team, and we've done a sales training for them, he will know the behavior change, and he will be able to tell you, yes, you know what, there was this marketing campaign that helped us, but the important thing is that John and Catherine were able to work with customers better. And then it really doesn't matter, is it out of that impact 50% training or 30% training, we know that the combination worked. Because very often it works because of the combination. Those separate things,
there's certain synergy in there. And then again, when you are surveying the managers, you can ask them like, how much of that, like, was it a success, do you think? And how much of that success do you attribute to different factors?
The same thing that comes, another thing that comes from the chat is about the A/B testing. If you can test 2 separate groups,
of course,
that's brilliant.
That's very scientific, yes. And of course, ideally, you have like 1,000 people who you take half of them randomly, you put them through the training, and then you see if those people who have been trained actually perform better, who haven't been trained. But unless your kind of business objective is running quality experiments and not making profits,
because that's
you will be forced into actually training everyone as soon as possible, because they all have to sell better. But ideally, yes, if you can separate it by countries or by regions or maybe by divisions, then yes, of course, that's also a very scientific and very solid approach. All right, level 4, we're finally here. Again, we are jumping from level to level, in like not even jumping, but we're progressing in a very logical manner. So business impact, that is essentially business analytics, what we have been talking about. This is where you need management buy-in, as we've spoken before, but in this case, we're not talking about the line managers that you actually supply training for their employees, but kind of the management of the whole company, probably, because it requires kind of a very high-level overview and in-depth look into what is happening at the company. And if the company leadership is not very much interested in what's happening there, then probably it's not very easy to measure. One important thing is that business impact never comes, next week after training, not even a month. So you have to give it enough time to accumulate the data and then kind of sink in and see what's happening. Even that hypothetical store manager will need, probably a few months of observations to kind of understand what's going on there. The question is very simple. Has business improved, and by how much, of course? So we've done all that training, any actual business impact or not? That's a very simple question. And this is where you elevate, like I said, to the leadership level, because this is what they're interested in. They're not interested in whether they like training or not. They're interested in whether it helped. And this is where you can actually talk to them to help you set up all those conversations with the IT people, with the management and so on, because those people are busy with whatever busy things they're doing. And as we all know, they might not be very welcoming to learning people trying with additional workload.
Yeah, and here I would say that the most important thing actually comes outside. It's not a particular learning project we're talking about, but more of what kind of situation learning is in your company. And here my advice would be to go back to what we talked about in the previous breakfast about being about the marketing. Yeah, so management of the company does talk to marketing, because marketing does some impact, some real impact, and they will listen to metrics and suggestions and ideas. And it's not always true with learning, and HR as such. We are kind of in a stepchild position as opposed to sales, marketing, production, and those functions.
In terms of budgets.
And amount of focus and attention we get. So here I would say that a very important thing is to try to become this internal agency, to try to act like marketing people, to have metrics, and to position yourself, not as a support function that does something that is basically inevitable and it's just a cost with no consequence, but rather that we can help you. For example, there is a new idea that, we are launching a new product. One thing is, we kind of need to train people, and so, and it kind of scales down to learning, and learning people try to produce some courses, but rather, I know that they are launching a new product. I come to them as a marketing agency and tell them, okay, what can I help you with? This is how I'm going to be measuring it. This is how I'm going to be helping you. This is my process. This is the KPIs I'll be looking at. So if you are launching a product, there is marketing and sales, but I'm part of this. If we do not train people, we risk that, all this product launch will not work. So, and it's about, assertiveness in your position in the company, because as soon as you get that attention, and as soon as the management sees that spending another 10,000 euros on training brings us back certain money in return, you will become part of that discussion. You'll become a part of those workshops, and you will get your cut of the budget, and you'll be able to measure. IT will listen to you. They will give you their time and attention, metrics. So it's a bit of a political thing here.
I would say it's kind of about repositioning the whole training as a profit center rather, or at least impact center, rather than a cost center.
Yes.
So that's and you really could look up to marketing in terms of how they do that, because frankly speaking, measurements in marketing are a bit of a witchcraft sometimes, right? So there's a lot of unmeasurable things, a lot of assumptions, a lot of money being spent without a very direct attribution to end results and so on. And of course, a lot of effort spent on actually measuring that and kind of doing everything that's possible in terms of actually make it more scientific, but still. And that is kind of the persona that we want to be inside a corporation when we talk about learning, I think.
Yeah, that's something to aspire to. Yeah.
Can you give me time, by the way?
Yeah, we've got another 15 minutes.
15 minutes, that's perfect, because we are on our last
fifth level.
Fifth level. You've mentioned returns. So basically, return on investment is measured very simply. You check how much money you got from it, you divide it by the money that you've invested, you subtract 1 to get just the percentage increase, and that's it. And the return can come in forms of increased sales, maybe increased savings, increased productivity, lowered risks, and such, right? Profits, anything that kind of brings in value. Any value is the return on your training. The math looks very simple. Let's say we've done the sales training, and our sales have grown because of that by 1.225 million. That mean and we've spent just €1 million on that sales training. So our return on investment is 25%, which allows us both to compare that to other incentives and allocate our resources to ones that bring more impact, and also see if it improved kind of as compared to its previous version, to the next version, and so on. So that's super simple, and of course nothing is ever simple in real life, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, the big question is, like, how do we measure that impact, right? And that is that's a trick that I will be presenting probably for the sake of continuity of this presentation. But in fact, I've learned it from Raivis, and he learned it hard way when we would come to a customer and they would say, okay, you are suggesting that this training will cost, well, maybe not €1 million, but there is a course that costs 20,000. Can you guarantee that we will get this money back? And can you guarantee that I will get 40,000 in return, so I get 100% return? We can't, and you can start kind of arguing about that. So they will ask you, like, how do you measure your learning impact? And we will retort with, how do you measure anything? Like, are you even measuring your sales or performance? And they will, not really, but that is not the point. And we would go into this never-ending argument. So in this kind of very much Aikido way, Raivis learned to evade that question, and we are going to teach you how to do that and how to make this conversation more productive, because this is the question that your management pretty much asks of you. Like,
of course,
type in chat, maybe just a plus, if you have ever been in a conversation where you're asking for a budget for a training and you receive a question like, can you prove that that training will pay off?
Yeah, Nagita already provided her question that she's working in a company that trains government officials, government servants, and there, I mean, government does not generate money. I mean, apart from the state revenue service, they can kind of measure tax intake. I don't know, maybe police can measure crimes, but a lot of government functions are not that measurable, certainly not in terms of money.
Yes.
Certainly not in terms of money. And people do get this question. So how do we deal with that?
Also, just before we jump to that, the data, even if we could get, of course we could get the sales data that it has grown, or we can get the crime data that the crime has dropped after we've trained people, to fight crime, or fraud in bank and so on. But the question is, how much of that is attributable to learning, and how much to everything else in that mix that we've just talked about? Like, there are new incentives for people to do that. If we talk about sales, there's demand and supply. Like, a new model came out and we've done the sales training, but of course people are buying it because of the new model and because of all the marketing, not because of the sales training and so on.
So at least marketing people will tell you that was before, because marketing and learning people might not tell you that's because of the training.
Yes. And so there's advertising that's impacting it. There's seasonality, right? The training comes out right before Christmas, has a huge impact. The training comes out in February, has no impact at all. And even when sales are dropping and you are doing the training, can you tell that they would have dropped otherwise more?
Yeah.
So that not having drop of 10% and instead just having a drop of 5% is a huge, accomplishment of your training department. So that's a very polluted and noisy data that we're looking at. That's very. So what we can do instead is we can take that money that we've spent and divide it, compare it to something measurable. And there are quite a few measurable things that we can rely upon. Number one, probably the most obvious thing is employees, right? So let's divide the cost of training by the number of employees. And we've run this project. We have which cost about like 25,000, right? We have 12,000 employees, so the course is like €2 per employee, and €2 per employee is something that makes sense, right? So it's probably less than you spend on coffee per month in the coffee machines, or that's way less than you spend on salary increases, or it's a number, because if you divide the same amount by 120 people that have gone through that training, because it's only been applicable to those couple of people, that's like €200 per person, and those people's wages are maybe €700 per person. So that seems like an inadequate, quite a lot of money, inadequate amount, right? Or something else. We have done trainings that have been applicable to like 20 people, and they have cost thousands, but per employer, given the salaries of those employees, given all other expenditure on those employees, that seemed adequate. But can we go a little bit further and check it against our sales performance, not in terms of like money, but in terms of certain items, and not necessarily even sold, maybe accomplished, maybe achieved, maybe reports filed, citizens, like if we talk about government, citizens served, and so on. So we can say, okay, let's say we sell 150,000 gadgets annually, and that means the training costs 15 cents per gadget sold. And each gadget we know on average costs €1,000. So it seems like not a huge amount of money. And your management will say, yeah, it doesn't look like a huge amount of money. We pack every gadget into a little bag, and that bag actually costs 50 cents, right?
Yeah.
So that doesn't seem like a huge training, right? We can do the same to customers served, even if those customers are not even if those customers are not paying us money, like not customers, but clients in the government institution, or to complaints, right? Every year we receive 1 million complaints, or bug reports, or system alerts, and that is just half a cent per bug report. Doesn't seem that much now, given that we have a whole bunch of people working on those bugs and so on. So take something measurable and compare it.
Yeah, I would even add that some of the soft skills trainings can be addressed this way. For example, stress management. If and many companies now, especially now, they measure the level of stress in the company.
Yeah.
So they can say that 20% of 20% of our employees are very stressed. They're like red zone stress level. Yeah. And then you do the measurement later, or at least you say, I am trying to reduce that, by half. Yeah, so I want no more than 10%, because 10% is some kind of benchmark. So then you can calculate how many people you are trying to get out of the red zone, let's say into the yellow zone at least, and make the same calculations. And then you can say, this stress management course will allow us, by spending, €25 per person, to move them into another grade. And I mean, a CEO would say, it makes sense, because €25, what is it?
And it's actually like let's do the marketing stuff, right?
Yeah.
So this is a great time to actually put your manager or your CEO or your leadership on the back foot and say, do you think that €25 per person to move them from red stress level to yellow stress level is adequate? Because they know it's not your job, it's their job to know how much that stress costs you in whatever turnover, sick leaves, lost deals, smashed computers and keyboards, and so on. So that's another way to approach that. And something else, like the last resort, you take net revenue. Like you can even take gross revenue. So just to remind you, in terms of accounting, the gross revenue is the whole amount of money that you've received in, from selling whatever you're selling. And net revenue is that minus the cost of goods sold, right? So it's not really profit, but it's very much close to profit. So you take that and you compare. You say that this course costs just 0.1% of our net revenue, right? And 0.1% of net revenue, if you put it in layman's terms, it means that if 10 out of 100 people that I've misspelled, 10 out of 100 people who completed this training sell just 1% more this year, it has paid off. Or 1 out of 100 people sells 10% more this year. Can you believe, like, you've seen this training, I've told you about this training that we have done, you have seen the smiley sheets, you have seen the reports from learners who say they are applying that, you have seen the reports from managers who are saying that it's helped. Do you believe, and you've seen that the sales have grown, do you believe that given all that, 1% out of 100 has sold by 10% more this year?
Yeah, and this is exactly, I think this brings us to the initial point that those KPIs have to be prepared in the very beginning. And one of the questions we received recently, I mean, it's COVID, and a lot of companies are cutting their costs, and the economic outlook is not exactly brilliant. And of course, training will come first, and getting money for training will be harder. That's a fact. In most cases, it will be like that. So my suggestion is that if you are preparing a training initiative, big or small, it's very important to do this mental calculation before. And when you go and ask for the budget, or when you allocate your budget and you try to be wise about it, then try to do it like marketing people do it. So you say, okay, the cost of the program is, I don't know, 100,000 euros, whatever. But my goal is that 80% of people, for example, will pass it. I believe that if we run this course, we will be able, like Sergey is saying here, that 1 out of 10 people will sell 10% more. So try to write it out in that kind of way. Or I believe that out of those
it's a funnel. It's a funnel.
It's a funnel.
This amount of people went in, this amount of people got trained, this amount of people actually applied on the job. Like this amount of people actually has sold more by this amount of percent. This is times the amount of sales that they do. This is the money that we've actually generated. This is our goal. And then it actually makes your job easier in terms of choosing where to allocate that budget and where to go, which project to bring to the attention of whoever decides on that budget. Because in many cases, you will just see, well, how is this relevant? Like this training that we're doing, I cannot find anything to kind of hang upon, right? So it's not correlated. It doesn't relate to anything that we actually do in terms of making money and becoming a better organization. And you say, well, obviously, if I will do that calculation afterwards, that will not look good. So you can do this kind of mental exercise beforehand and allocate your budgets that will be becoming smaller. And for us, when we fight for those budgets as external vendors, we're just fighting for the budgets. In most cases, you are most likely fighting for allocations, right? We do that sometimes with some of these clients who are here, where we kind of are plugged in and we help decide on where to focus and so on. But for you, this way more important to do that. So that trick will probably come even more handy.
Yeah, it's true that there is no situation where certain training is not attached to certain kind of results. Yeah, even compliance training that is associated sometimes with fines. The GDPR, the anti-money laundering. So there is always something, not always positive, but sometimes you can measure and do those calculations using assumptions about the bad things that might happen if we do not do that.
Yeah.
One comment that came in the chat is about that COVID also presents an opportunity for the online training, because yeah, traveling will be cut, classroom trainings will be cut. Of course, it is like that, yeah. But I also know that in certain companies that are preparing for a very hard landing, you know, in industries that were impacted the most, you know, retail and traveling, kind of not traveling, but what is transportation? Of course, training is cut completely. Yeah. So any kind of training initiatives there are stopped, online or offline. But of course, moving to the online part nowadays, it's much easier to justify. And I think some of you can go now back to your management and tell them, you know what, remember 3 years ago, I said we have to go into e-learning, we have to grow that. So now you see why we've been doing it. Yeah. So
that's true. That's it has kind of the time to either reap what you sow,
yeah,
or scramble and use summer for preparing for, you know, everyone's preparing for the second wave, everyone's preparing for plan B, and so on. And part of that is allocating budget and then calculating what should be cut, what cannot be cut,
yeah,
where money should be invested, and how that works.
So
that's the end pretty much of our breakfast, but there are a couple of questions that I wanted to ask you. I will abandon my poll. I will do a better job next time. I didn't know that they all come at once. I thought I would be able to launch questions one by one. Yeah. But my first question to you, and just in terms of answering just type 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, which levels do you think, and there can be multiple levels in one answer, which levels are you already using? So I will go back to that metrics real quickly. So which levels are you on?
Yeah, so
I expect everyone to be on at least level 1 if you're measuring, but it's okay if you're not measuring anything. You're just too busy delivering learning, assuming that it works.
Yeah, so we have 1 and 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 2 to 3. Yes.
1, 2 in most cases.
Yeah, so that's not surprising. You see, just to summarize, the ROI is theoretically a very good level to be at, but practically is a very, very complicated one.
And quite expensive as well. I mean, you cannot do ROI calculation and the whole kind of endeavor of going there for, let's say, a single course or a non-essential course and so on. That is something that you kind of apply to whole learning campaigns, which can be a lot of learning or just transferring from classroom to online learning, stuff like that, or like launching learning as such. You know, it's surprising how many companies in 2020 are still going to like launch learning as such and kind of become structured about it and so on. So it doesn't mean that you know, you're doing a bad job because you're not measuring every little test that you've run in your LMS on return on investment. So all right, we have
a couple of answers.
Okay. And then I will ask you 2 questions. Question 1, how did you like the training? Where 5 is the best, like you really loved it, like today's talk. How did you enjoy that? Level 5, you enjoyed it a lot. 1, it was terrible. And
should have been elsewhere.
You should have been elsewhere, but you know, just by chance you've spent that hour with us nonetheless, because you just waited for this moment to tell us how bad we are. So.
So we have 4, 5, we have an 8.
That's Oksana.
That's Oksana, yeah. So 4 and 5. So
now let me ask you another question. How likely are you to use that information that we've given you and hopefully a little bit of skill set that we've transferred to you today in your job? So 5, if you're going to use that immediately, you're going to sit down and do some calculations today or for the next program you're running. 4, if that might come useful, that will come useful at some point. 3, if you're not sure if it's useful, and 2, if you don't think it's useful, and 1, if you think it's detrimental, and doing that is just a waste of time. So 5, if you're gonna do that right now. 4, if you're going to do that at some point. 3, if you may be going to do that, and seems like a great idea, but you're not sure. 2, if it's not useful.
Yeah, so we have 5. We have a lot of 4s: 1 5, 1 3, 1 4. So
there's I would say that there is about 1 point of difference,
Yeah.
right? And that is actually what I wanted to illustrate as a closing note, more or less, right? It's great that everyone liked it. It's been a great conversation. We're super happy that everyone was participating in chat, and I take it as an indicator that we're doing a good job here in front of a microphone. And when it comes to actually applicability, that goes down a little bit, and that is kind of the point that I wanted to leave you with. Always strive to get as high up on this pyramid from 1 to 5. Always try to kind of look ahead into the next level, and whenever you decide to measure something, plan ahead. Decide what you're going to measure and how you're going to do that, and whose help you're going to need to do that before you start the training incentive. It will make everything happen basically automatically in the end. So thank you for being
much.
here. Thank you, Raivis, for joining and sharing that practical side of things. And don't hesitate to subscribe to our Instagram, subscribe to our Facebook, subscribe to our newsletters. Send us emails to info@INTEA.lv. Keep in touch. Suggest your topics as well.
Most importantly, suggest your topics.
If you already have a topic in mind, drop it in chat. You can drop it privately or for everyone to see. We're very much interested. It's not like we don't have ideas of what to talk about. We have plenty, but we want this to be
applicable and relevant and usable afterwards.
Exactly. Thank you, Raivis.
Thank you.
Thank you and goodbye. Have a great day. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.